Hi everyone, I'm Victoria and welcome back to the Criminosis Podcast, where I look at true crime cases, but also delve deeper into some of the psychological or possibly sociological issues that occur within some of these cases. Today, we'll be looking at the case of Damilola Taylor, which I feel most of us that engage with true crime content may well know. But I wanted to take a look at this case because I remember when this happened. I think I was around 12 or 13 at the time. And I remember everyone just being in a state of shock that a 10-year-old boy was murdered in Peckham. It wasn't just the fact that obviously he was murdered in Peckham, but the fact that it was just a 10-year-old boy. But for me, I actually grew up in Southeast London, not too far from Peckham. And so everything that I kind of did was in the surrounding areas. So I do remember being in school and everyone was just shocked because remember, we're around 12 or 13 at the time. And so, people knew people that may be involved, or there were rumors of that going around, and everyone was just surprised and shocked and possibly scared as well because again, some of my friends lived near where Damilola was murdered, and I also visited Peckham quite regularly and had family that lived near there. So it was a familiar area for us. I actually remember going to Peckham a lot when I was younger, when my mum would go and do her food shop there in the market, for meat. And if you're African or Nigerian, you would definitely know what I mean by this. But she would get her meat shopping in Peckham on a Sunday after church, for example, and then take that home and prepare it for the week, or the next couple of weeks, and keep it in the freezer. But that was kind of my memory of Peckham at the time. And also I had family that lived near there, so we'd visit them too. But I do remember Peckham also being a place not just for shopping for meat, but it was also a place that I never really felt safe there. Like, I would not want to have walked around Peckham by myself as a young girl. Peckham itself just wasn't how it is today. And I'm going to go into more detail as to what Peckham was like back when Damilola was murdered. But I just wanted to set the scene for you so you kind of understand where we're coming from with regards to what happened in this case. So before we take a look at Damilola's case in more detail, I just want to say thank you for joining me today. If you are new, then welcome. And if you're returning, then welcome back. You can find me on your, hopefully, favorite podcast platforms. I believe I'm on Spotify now and Google, TuneIn, Podbean. I'm hoping that I'll be on Apple Podcasts soon. I am relatively new, so please bear with me as we navigate the podcast world. But you can also find me on YouTube too. So if you're watching on YouTube, hello. And hopefully you guys on YouTube can subscribe and like and comment and share as well. So with that being said, let's take a look at the case of Damilola Taylor. Damilola was born on the 7th of December 1989 in Lagos, Nigeria, to parents Richard and Gloria Taylor. He was the younger brother of his older brother Tunde and sister Bemi. He was always smiling according to his father, and he had an old soul, and he was very respectful to his elders. Whilst in Nigeria, everything was fine. Damilola was attending school along with his brother and sister, but for medical reasons, the family decided to move to the UK. Now, I did read that Bemi suffered from severe epilepsy, so this was the reason that the family decided to get medical treatment in the UK. So they decided to move in the year 2000, but Richard Taylor, Damilola's father, decided to stay in Nigeria because he had a good job. He was a civil servant in Nigeria and he was earning good money. He was able to provide for the family. So he decided he would stay on in Nigeria and work, whilst Gloria moved with the 3 kids to the UK. The family ended up settling into the North Peckham estate in South London, and this was definitely different to the lifestyle that they had been accustomed to in Nigeria. You see, Peckham, like I've just said, at the time was a place with high poverty levels. Over half of the residents earning less than £150 per week, and compared to the national average of £418 per week at the time, this was significantly low. Also, youth crimes had increased by 40% in that past year, and Peckham was seeing a major growth in the number of youth gangs. Now, when Damilola moved to Peckham, he actually really enjoyed his school. I believe he attended Oliver Goldsmith Primary School in Peckham. He was actually very happy with his school, and I read that he joined the football team and was the goalkeeper in the football team, which he loved because he loved playing football. But he also became a prefect in school too. He enjoyed being in London, and when his dad actually suggested that he return to Nigeria after 3 months, he said he actually wanted to stay because there were just more opportunities for him in London. For example, he had access to computers and the internet quite freely, which he didn't really have ease of access to in Nigeria. Damilola was very studious and into his education. He also was very ambitious. He actually wanted to become a doctor. And this studious nature is definitely a trait you'll find amongst Nigerian families. Now, unfortunately for Damilola, it wasn't until he started visiting the library after school that the problems started for him. You see, young people started approaching and harassing the younger kids, including Damilola, trying to get them to join their gangs. But of course, for Damilola, he wasn't interested. Like I said, he was into his education. He wanted to go on the internet. He loved computers. You know, he was ambitious. He was, even at the age of 10, he was not interested in being part of any gang. He just wanted to visit the library and then head home afterwards. But on November 27th, 2000, everything changed for the Taylor family. Damilola left his school, Oliver Goldsmith Primary School, and went to an after-school club, which was actually a computer club at Peckham Library, which wasn't really a far distance from his school. When it had finished, it was dark because this was November, and obviously it was dark at this time. It was actually 4:51 p.m. when Damilola was making his way home from the library. And he was making his way home to the North Peckham estate, which was just a few minutes walk away. Unfortunately, this would be the last journey home that Damilola would make. As he made his way onto Blake's Road, he was just 400 yards away from his home when he was stopped and surrounded by a gang of youths. They approached Damilola, and it's believed that they tried to steal his silver puffer jacket. But, of course, he refused. And because he refused to give it to them, the police believe that's why they ended up stabbing him in the leg with a broken bottle that was on the ground nearby. After the attack, these youths just ran away and left Damilola to bleed to death. He ended up staggering to try and find help, and he managed to get up and walk to a nearby stairwell, leaving a trail of blood behind him. And this is where he collapsed as he could no longer continue. You see, Damilola was slowly bleeding to death. I did read that he was on the stairwell for about half an hour before anybody found him. And it was a local resident, a carpenter, who was walking nearby and saw the trail of blood and decided to follow this, that found Damilola collapsed at the top of the stairwell. This resident immediately phoned 999 and reported what he saw. Now, I'm going to try and play a clip of this phone call.
Yeah, can you send an ambulance to Blake's Road?
Blake's Road? Or
yeah,
road?
Road.
Road, yeah, what area?
Off Southampton Way, SE15.
SE15?
Yeah, SE15, yeah. It's a boy bleeding to death.
Right,
He's actually bleeding to death. This boy is approximately about 12 years of age.
What happened?
He has lost a hell of a lot of blood.
Yeah, how has he done that? What's happened?
We do not know, sir. We've just come out and found him on the staircase. He tried to climb up there.
Right, where's he bleeding from?
He's going. He's in a real
Where's he bleeding from?
We cannot tell.
Damilola during this time obviously was in so much pain, but, you know, showing his selfless nature, all he could say to the people that were trying to help him was, "I'm okay." Unfortunately, even though he was rushed to hospital, Damilola was pronounced dead at 5:47 p.m. It was deemed that the bottle had severed his femoral artery and he had lost too much blood to survive. Now, remember that Damilola was supposed to have been home by now. The library was literally just a few minutes walk away. And so when he hadn't returned home, his mother Gloria went out to look for him. When she approached Blake's Road, she saw police cordons and she just knew that something was wrong. And when someone told her that a young boy had been attacked, she just knew it was her son, Damilola. Also, remember that Damilola's father, Richard Taylor, was still in Nigeria at this time because he was working. And so he received a call at work, and this call went to his director's office, and he was a bit surprised, confused as to why this happened, but they told him that this was a very serious call that he needed to take. And Richard recalls hearing the person on the other end telling him that Damilola went to school and after was stabbed and is now dead. And he just recalls just collapsing, saying that he finds it difficult to remember anything that happened after the news had broke. He actually was taken to hospital, I think, to be treated for shock, because that's how much the news had impacted him. But very soon afterwards, he made his way to the UK, and he said he found it overwhelming just witnessing everything that was going on at the time. And it was a lot, guys. This was big news for the UK, and it even made international news. The nation and beyond was angry. Everyone was in shock and disbelief that a 10-year-old boy would be murdered on the streets of London. People wanted answers, and they wanted to bring Damilola's killers to justice. Just days after his murder, and on Damilola's 11th birthday, a memorial service was held, which was organised by the church that Gloria Taylor was attending at the time. Many people actually attended, from the police to local MP Harriet Tarman. Richard Taylor said that he was still in shock, that he couldn't even comprehend or process anything that was happening during the service. Damilola's brother Tunde spoke at the memorial service. He said that life could never be the same without him, and how that he always wanted a brother, but now that opportunity has been taken away. So police had a huge job on their hands. They would end up using CCTV and door-to-door inquiries to aid their investigation immediately after the murder. However, the residents of the area were not as cooperative as police had hoped. You see, in the previous year, the inquiry into Stephen Lawrence's murder had called the police institutionally racist, so many people did not have much trust in the police, and they were not willing to speak. There were those who basically did not want to talk to the police because they just did not trust the police, and that was probably the majority of the people they were trying to speak to. And then you had, on the other hand, people that were more open to speaking to the police, but they weren't able to give the information that the police needed. So the police really weren't getting anywhere with this. Now, part of the issue with coming forward was also that by doing so, you'd be involved with the whole process, from identity parades to appearing in court. And, you know, this can take a long time, and people just did not want to do it. But also, a lot of people feared retribution. In the first few weeks of the investigation, 11 people were actually arrested, but they ended up being released as there just wasn't enough evidence to charge them. Now, remember this significant point. There were a lot of rumours at the time, and many papers covered this case, with many initially asking why it happened. And then after the first week, this changed to why was it taking the police so long? As the police were seemingly getting nowhere with their investigation, many of the residents started to fear that their children or their child would be next. So to combat this fear, the police actually placed more police around the estate in an operation that they called Operation Seal. And this was to assure residents that no murder would actually occur on the street. Now, it wasn't until the 26th of June 2001 that the police had received their first witness, who had named 4 teenagers as being involved in the murder. The police quickly arrested and charged these suspects, and the case was finally going to court, but as you can tell from my tone, this didn't go to plan. On the 30th of January 2002, the trial began. The witness was a young girl who was given the name Bromley for protection. She was 12 on the day of the murder, and she called the police on the 23rd of December 2000, so about a month after. And she tried to give information anonymously, but the police were able to track her down because they had her phone number. Initially, she told the police that a 16-year-old had called her and confessed to killing Damilola. So police checked her phone records and found that this wasn't true. Now, this would be the first of many untruths. She then changed her story, saying that another 15-year-old had told her about the stabbing. Later, she admitted to making this up too. She would later go on to tell the police that she had witnessed the attack, but her account was full of inconsistencies and more lies. For example, she told police the blood was coming out of Damilola like a water fountain, but in another account, she said that she hadn't seen any blood. In fact, the judge, later on in the trial, would say that this reference to a water fountain was used in a news report that was published just a week after Damilola's murder. Bromley would also go on to say that she knew and met the 16-year-old brothers that she had accused. But again, this was also a lie. Another lie was that she had a logbook of all of the brothers' crimes and that she had buried it in a park in Peckham, which, of course, I don't need to say this again, but we all know it was a lie because the police actually went searching for it and could not find this logbook. Bromley gave 6 different versions of where she went and who she saw before witnessing the attack. Other accounts of Bromley's story just did not add up either. She said the attack had taken place near some black doors, but again, this was inconsistent with the blood trail. And she also said that she had hidden behind a Fiat Punto, but police couldn't find a car like this on the road at the crime scene. During police interviews, Bromley had told the police how she witnessed Damilola laying on the ground crying for help, but when she was cross-examined in the trial, she said that she never saw this. Weirdly, Bromley had also said that she had seen a Scot, and by that she means a Scottish man, on Blake's Road just moments before the attack, and that he'd been taking pictures with a flash. But again, this could not be corroborated. And at this point, I don't really know if this man ever existed. So after hearing all of that, you may be wondering why police even used such an unreliable witness. And I can only assume it was because they had so little to go on in the first instance. It is believed that the police used inducements to persuade Bromley to lie in court. Now, I didn't mention this before, but there was a £50,000 reward prize, and she was promised this. But she was also given a mobile phone by the police, and she was given new clothes too. In fact, only one of the police interviews was conducted in accordance with Home Office guidelines on dealing with child witnesses. It's believed that Bromley was told that she would get one of her friends, who was defendant number 4, off the hook if she admitted witnessing the murder. Also, that she would be guaranteed the reward money. Remember how young she was at this time, guys. By the time of the trial, Bromley was 14 years old. She was, believe it or not, supposed to be the prosecution's key witness. She was on the witness box for 5.5 days, and as we've just seen, she just gave an account that confused everybody. And the judge literally had no other choice but to throw out her evidence and state it as unreliable. After all the lies she told, Bromley herself exclaimed at one point, "How am I supposed to remember all the lies I've told?" She literally said that, guys, in court. It wasn't even just her lies that were damning in court. When she was put under pressure, she would throw tantrums. She stomped out of the witness box at one point. She even swore at one of the QCs and giggled when told that her account of what happened was absurd. When you're in court, you're given a character reference as well. So they contacted her school as one of her referees, I'm assuming. And this was not glowing, to say the least. Her school said that she was dishonest and mentally disturbed. In fact, during the police interview, she was recorded singing "I'm in the money," referring to the 50k reward. Because she was part of the witness protection program, she was put up in a hotel in Croydon, South London, and her mum managed to run up a bill of over £4,000 in 8 days. What were they spending it on? So as you can see, this initial trial proved to be a fiasco, to say the least. The case was thrown out of court on the 27th of February 2002 with a verdict of not guilty for each of the 4 defendants being issued. The public and Damilola's parents were angry that the mistakes of the police had led to the collapse of the trial. But the investigation still remained open, and the police were determined even more so now to see justice being served. A year after Damilola's murder, the Damilola Trust was launched in London. The trust was to help young people who were in danger of getting involved in crime, as they believed these children were themselves victims of terrible upbringing. So they wanted to ensure their trust supported these young people in achieving their goals. It offers young people practical help and advice, something which they may never have received without such an organisation. Richard Taylor has said that for the rest of his life, he wants to give these young people the opportunities that Damilola has been deprived of and help them achieve things that Damilola can never achieve again. Now, after this case had collapsed in court, police were still busy with their own investigation. They had now arrested 3 people in connection with Damilola Taylor's murder, and 2 of those arrested were brothers who at the time were not named because of their age, but we now know them to be the Preddy brothers. Richard, or Ricky Preddy, was 17 at the time of the arrest, and Daniel, or Danny Preddy, was 16, and their friend Hassan Jihad, who was named because he was 19. These arrests came as a result of the developments of DNA testing, as the police were now able to identify the blood of Damilola Taylor on Daniel Preddy's trainers. His blood was also found on the sweatshirt cuff of his brother, Ricky Preddy. In January 2005, just over 4 years after Damilola's murder, the 3 suspects were charged. In fact, they were not the same suspects from the first trial, but all 3 were originally arrested in the first few weeks when police had made 11 arrests and released them without charge. There was a new senior investigating officer who wanted to look at the case with a new fresh pair of eyes, and that's how the new DNA evidence was recovered when I believe he sent the evidence off to a private lab. So again, we're back to trial. And again, it wasn't a straightforward trial, so if you're not keeping up, this is trial number 2. Despite the DNA evidence, the rest of the evidence was largely circumstantial, and police no longer had an eyewitness. The prosecution did try to put forward people who claimed that the brothers had confessed to murdering Damilola, but this didn't work, as under cross-examination, their testimony was weakened. A medical expert witness even told the jurors that Damilola's death could have been an accident. I did do a bit of reading around this, and I believe they tried to propose that Damilola could have fallen on the broken bottle, which I don't really understand, but hey. On the 3rd of April 2006, Hassan Jihad was actually cleared of all charges, and then the next day, the Preddy brothers were cleared of murder, but the jury were unable to reach a verdict on manslaughter. Again, everyone was frustrated with the trial outcome. Would justice ever be served? So before we continue with the case, I wanted to take a look at who the main suspects are. The Preddy brothers. As notorious as their name sounds now, the Preddy brothers have been well known on the streets of Peckham since the ages of 10 and 11. They were part of their gang, the Young Peckham Boys, and they were brought up by their mother, Marion Johnson. Now, I don't know if she was a single parent because I couldn't find much information about partners or their father or anything. But for the most part, they were left to basically run feral on the streets of Peckham. They would terrorize residents of the North Peckham estate, steal mobile phones, and rob members of the public. And remember, guys, they were still very young at the time. Danny Preddy was considered to be the toughest and most notorious of the gang. In fact, just 5 months before Damilola's murder, he was convicted of assault with the intent to rob after attacking a teenager with a baseball bat and demanding money from him. On the day of Damilola's murder, he was actually on bail for 5 offences and should have been on a 24-hour curfew at the Abbey Street Children's Home for these offences, but he actually managed to escape that night to join his gang for what was now to be a fateful evening. Ricky Preddy was no different. He was 13 at the time of Damilola's murder and was similar to his brother in his criminal past. He too was supposed to be under supervision for going equipped to rob at the time of Damilola's murder, so we can see that there has definitely been some lapse in the monitoring and supervision of both of these boys. Now, if they were monitored, if they were supervised as they should have been, could Damilola's murder have been prevented? Apparently, just a year before Damilola's murder, the Preddy brothers were charged, and guys, remember their age? Yeah, very young. They were charged with a multiple sex attack on 2 girls aged 10 and 12 in a park in Peckham. But they were freed in June 2000 when the case was thrown out of the Old Bailey court as the judge deemed them to be too young to have a trial in an adult court. And of course, this angered residents of the North Peckham estate where the boys lived, and so when news of Damilola's murder was made known, the Preddy brothers' names were not far from people's lips. Like I mentioned previously, the Preddys were initially arrested when someone came forward to say they had admitted killing Damilola, but they were soon released when the 12-year-old witness Bromley came forward with her own very different testimony and suspects. And guys, you can't make this up. Believe it or not, the Preddys had even met the 4 teenagers that Bromley had originally accused of committing the murder. The Preddys had met these teenagers outside of court to celebrate their release when the initial first trial had been thrown out. Like, I don't know. Now, during the police investigation into Damilola's murder, the Preddy brothers were still causing chaos on the streets, so they weren't even trying to, live a quiet life at this point. In fact, Danny Preddy was sentenced to 3 years for robbing passengers on a train at knife point, and Ricky was arrested many times for violent offences. So this brings us back to the arrests and trial of the Preddy brothers. Despite the second trial collapsing, on the 6th of April 2006, the CPS, which is the Crown Prosecution Service, announced that the brothers would be retried. And this retrial occurred, so now we're actually on trial number 3. This retrial occurred on the 23rd of June 2006, and it resulted in the brothers being convicted of manslaughter on the 9th of August 2006. Now, some have questioned why it wasn't murder. Well, this was because there was never any evidence provided by the prosecution or the defense that the bottle was taken to the crime scene. So you remember that Damilola was stabbed with a broken bottle that was found on the ground? Well, that bottle wasn't taken to the crime scene. It was found there and then used to kill Damilola. So there was no intent to kill. So therefore, they cannot be charged for murder, regardless of what you think. They were each sentenced to 8 years in youth custody. And when the verdict was read out, Ricky started shouting aggressively at the jury from the dock. Ricky Preddy was the first to be released on the 8th of September 2010 after serving just 4 years. And Danny was later released in 2011. So guys, remember, Ricky and Danny Preddy were just 12 and 13 when they killed Damilola Taylor. However, Ricky's freedom didn't last, as on the 13th of March 2011, he was recalled for associating with gang members. And then he was released on the 25th of January 2012. However, after just 16 days of release, he was back in prison. In December 2013 and November 2017, Ricky Preddy received 2 more sentences for driving offences. One involved a stolen motorbike and a high-speed police chase. And he's still going on, guys, because in February 2020, he was handed a 4-year sentence for driving a vehicle into a female police officer. Guys, this is all after he has been sent to prison for murder. And I just wanted to put in here that when I was training to be a teacher, I actually did part of my training in a prison. And I remember seeing Ricky Preddy in prison when he had just arrived in prison. I think he had just been in a fight or something in his previous prison, so he was transferred. And I remember seeing him, and I was thinking, where have I seen this face before? And then the psychologist I was with, she told me who he was, and I then clicked and everything. But yeah, just not pleasant people at all. So unsurprisingly, Preddy's compulsive criminal behaviour and the societal context around it has been the source of yet more pain for the Taylor family. A spokesperson for the family told the media that the Taylor family, society at large, and also the boys themselves have been failed by the system and the academics that run it. And ironically, the Preddy boys are the kind of young person the Damilola Taylor Trust wants to help and does help and works with. Now, I didn't know where to put this in the telling of this case, but a further sad addition to this case is that in 2008, Gloria Taylor, Damilola Taylor's mother, actually died of a heart attack. She was walking on Shooters Hill in London, South London, on the evening of the 8th of April 2008 with her husband Richard when she just collapsed. And she was rushed to hospital, but she was pronounced dead. And she was just 57 years old, guys. Richard Taylor would go on to receive an OBE for his campaign work through the Damilola Taylor Trust, which has spearheaded school programs, career development initiatives, and anti-knife crime drives. In an interview with the BBC, he says that the young people are still killing themselves over nothing. He says, "I don't see why this is still going on, but the Damilola Taylor Trust has started yielding fruits." 2 decades on from his death, the little boy who came to England with dreams of being a doctor continues to inspire others to change and affect change around them. Now, speaking of change, I wanted to talk about Peckham for a moment, because I talked about how bad Peckham was at the beginning, but I didn't think it was a fair judgment to make of Peckham today. Now, I don't live in Peckham. I haven't been to Peckham for a while, but I do know, obviously, family members that still visit Peckham. In fact, my mum visited Peckham the other day, and she actually said to me on the phone that it's so different now. Like, it has like little cafes and people. I think they're just trying to give a new vibe to Peckham now. But we can definitely see that Southwark Council has invested a lot in the regeneration of Peckham, and I can only believe that part of the reason for this was Damilola's murder. And I believe that they did tear down a lot of the estates that were in Peckham at the time of Damilola's murder. They no longer exist. And they're just regenerating the whole area. And it's definitely, over the last 20 years or so, it has improved a lot. Is it perfect? Probably not. But it's very different to how it was when Damilola lived there. And I also did a bit more digging into like what Southwark Council actually did. And I saw that in a documentary, I saw that Southwark Council also invested in hiring young people. From what I saw, the people that were interviewed were quite young, but these were young people that were hired by Southwark Council, lived in the area to basically be like advisors. I think they called them young people advisors in the area for the youth of the area, and they advise the young people in the area, help them with business, help them with career choices, mentor them. So these are people to support the young people, help give them direction in life. And I think this has definitely had a significant impact on the lives of the young people. So I'm glad to see that there has been steps alongside the Damilola Taylor Trust. There were steps to improve the lives of young people in the area. So thank you so much for taking the time to listen to Damilola's case. Let me know your thoughts on the sentencing of the Preddy brothers and whether you think things have changed on the streets today, particularly the streets of London, if you are familiar with that. Don't forget to like and comment on the Criminosis Podcast, because I'd love to hear your thoughts on the case, and also follow for more of the Criminosis Podcast cases that I'll be covering. If you are watching on YouTube, then don't forget to subscribe and also share with your friends and family too. I'll be back with a new case next week, guys. Thanks so much. Take care. Stay safe. Bye.